Dance with me, please. My ex is looking, she murmured, not knowing he was her billionaire CEO. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to tonight's story. Dance with me, please. My ex is looking. The ballroom shimmered under 1,000 chandeliers, gold light spilling across marble floors polished enough to mirror every step. The air hummed with laughter, champagne bubbles, and the low pulse of a string quartet playing something elegant but distant. Near the edge of that brilliance stood Lila Evans, her hands clasped tightly around a borrowed clutch. The deep blue gown she wore belonged to her best friend, its seams just a little too tight, its fabric whispering of a life far richer than hers. She was not supposed to be here. Lila was an event assistant, filling in for a sick co-worker. Her job was to deliver wine lists and smile at strangers, not to mingle with the city's elite. Yet here she was, pretending to belong among people who never worried about overdue rent or medical bills. She tried to focus on the tray of glasses she carried, but the soft music tangled with her heartbeat until she almost forgot how to breathe. Across the room, a man stood perfectly still, untouched by the noise around him. Alexander Reed. His presence carried the calm of authority, broad shoulders under a tailored black suit, eyes sharp, posture unyielding. The CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a billionaire known for his composure and cold logic. But at this moment, his jaw was tight, his gaze locked on something beyond the crowd. Following his line of sight, Lila saw her. A woman in a crimson dress, graceful and confident, her hand resting on another man's arm. The whispers began almost instantly. Elena, Alexander's ex-fiancée, now flaunting her new relationship at the very gala hosted by his company. Lila tried to look away, but before she could, Alexander's eyes met hers. For a heartbeat, she froze, glass trembling on the tray. He crossed the floor toward her with quiet precision, the music swelling as if the orchestra sensed the shift. When he stopped in front of her, the room seemed to hold its breath. "Dance with me," he said softly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Lila blinked. I think you have me confused with someone else, sir." A faint curve touched his lips, not quite a smile. "I know exactly who you are. My ex is watching, and I need a partner for one song. Please." Once the tray in her hands felt suddenly heavy. She should have said no. She was staff, invisible, replaceable. But something in his eyes, the flicker of vulnerability behind the calm, disarmed her. Without another word, she set the tray aside and placed her hand in his. The world blurred. The chandeliers melted into streaks of gold as he led her onto the dance floor. His palm was warm, steady against her back. Her heart raced so loud she could hardly hear the violins. "Relax," he murmured, guiding her through the first turn. "Just follow my lead." "I do not even know how to waltz," she whispered. "You are doing fine," he replied. For a few minutes, they moved as if no one else existed, just two strangers orbiting each other under the watchful eyes of the city's richest. To everyone else, it looked like confidence. To Lila, it felt like a storm she had accidentally stepped into. When the music slowed, Alexander leaned closer, his breath brushing her ear. "Thank you for saving me from humiliation." "I did not do anything," she murmured. "You did more than you think." He stepped back, released her hand, and the mask of the CEO returned as quickly as it had slipped. With a polite nod, he turned away, vanishing into the swirl of gowns and tuxedos. Lila stood in the middle of the ballroom, her pulse still unsteady, trying to understand what had just happened. She did not know that in less than 24 hours, the same man who had just asked her to dance would summon her to his office with a proposal that would change her life forever. The next morning, the city woke under a silver haze. Rain streaked across the glass walls of Sterling Dynamics, blurring the skyline like watercolor. Inside the lobby, Lila clutched her small purse, her stomach tight with nerves. She had been told to come to the 32nd floor for an urgent meeting. No reason given. Only the voice of Alexander Reed's assistant, polite but firm. The elevator climbed in silence. Her reflection in the mirrored wall looked pale, tired, and out of place. She tried to steady her breathing, but her mind kept replaying the ballroom, the music, and the words that still echoed in her chest. "Dance with me." When the doors slid open, a receptionist led her through a hallway lined with dark oak panels and framed awards. Everything here smelled of success, subtle, expensive, and distant. The office at the end was flooded with light. Alexander stood near the window, hands in his pockets, looking down at the city as if it belonged to him. Without turning, he said, "Miss Evans, thank you for coming." She hesitated at the doorway. "Sir, if this is about last night, I am really sorry. I should not have—" He turned then, his expression unreadable. "You saved me from a very uncomfortable scene. I should be the one thanking you." Lila blinked, unsure how to respond. "I was only doing what you asked." Alexander motioned to the seat across from his desk. "Please, sit. I have a proposal for you." Her pulse jumped. The word proposal sounded far too serious. She sat slowly, clutching her purse in her lap. He continued, his tone steady but measured. "My company is preparing for a series of public events. After last night, the media has already picked up the idea that I am seeing someone new. It would be inconvenient to deny it now." He paused, watching her face carefully. "I need you to continue what you started. Pretend to be my girlfriend for a few weeks." Lila stared at him, almost laughing from disbelief. "You want me to pretend to date you?" "Yes. There will be events, galas, board meetings. Appearances matter in my world. You will be compensated generously, and your current job will be protected." Her throat tightened. "Why me? You could hire anyone, a model, an actress." His eyes softened just slightly. "Because you were real. People saw that last night. You were nervous, genuine. That is something money cannot buy." Lila looked down at her hands. The offer sounded impossible, almost absurd. She had debts, hospital bills, rent due in 3 days. But the idea of entering his world, even as a lie, made her chest ache with fear. "What would I have to do?" she asked quietly. He slid a small folder across the desk. Inside was a short contract, typed in crisp black letters. "You will attend scheduled appearances. You will keep our arrangement private, and there will be no personal involvement beyond what is necessary for the act. The agreement ends after 4 weeks." Lila traced the edge of the paper. "No personal involvement," she repeated. "So it is all pretend?" Alexander nodded once. "Completely." She thought of her mother, still recovering from another round of hospital treatments. She thought of the eviction notice taped to her apartment door. Pride battled with desperation until the latter won. "4 weeks," she said at last. "I will do it." A faint smile flickered across his face, gone as quickly as it appeared. "Good. My assistant will arrange everything. We have an event this Friday. You will need a new wardrobe, media coaching, and—" He stopped when he noticed her expression, half shock, half amusement. "You look overwhelmed." "I just clean offices for a living," she admitted softly. "I'm not sure I know how to play someone like her." He leaned forward slightly, his voice lower. "Then let me worry about that. You only have to be yourself." For a moment, neither of them moved. The rain tapped gently against the windows, and the city below blurred into silver streaks. Lila signed the paper with a trembling hand, realizing she had just agreed to step into a world that did not belong to her, and a story that was only beginning to unfold. The next few days passed in a blur of appointments, fittings, and lessons that made Lila feel like she was living someone else's life. The quiet corners of her small apartment were replaced by designer showrooms, bright mirrors, and the steady voice of Clara, Alexander's personal assistant, who seemed to know everything about image and etiquette. "Chin up, shoulders back," Clara repeated, walking circles around her as she practiced holding a champagne glass. "You are not an employee tonight. You are his partner. Confidence is not optional." Lila tried to smile, but her reflection in the mirror hardly looked like her. The simple girl who used to serve drinks at events now wore silk instead of cotton, heels instead of flats. Every strand of hair had been shaped into something elegant. She looked beautiful maybe, but not real. By Friday evening, the transformation was complete. A black car waited outside her building, its polished doors reflecting the streetlights. When she stepped inside, the scent of leather and faint cologne wrapped around her. Alexander was already there, seated with the composure of a man who belonged everywhere he went. "You look different," he said finally, his tone more observation than compliment. Different good or different bad? She asked, still clutching her small purse. He allowed a hint of a smile. Different, right. The car glided through downtown toward the Langston Hotel, where Sterling Dynamics was hosting a product launch. Flashbulbs burst in the distance as they approached. The moment Lila saw the press crowd, her breath caught. "I cannot do this," she whispered. "You can," Alexander said firmly. "Remember, it is only a role. Stay beside me, answer politely, and smile when you do not know what to say." He stepped out first, then turned and offered his hand. Cameras clicked like thunder. The warmth of his palm steadied her as she followed him onto the red carpet. The reporters shouted questions. "Who is she? Is this your new girlfriend, Mr. Reed?" But Alexander kept walking, calm and unreadable. Inside, the ballroom glittered again, filled with laughter and music. But tonight Lila was not invisible. Eyes followed her. Whispers trailed her steps. At their table, she focused on breathing, repeating the lessons Clara had drilled into her. Smile softly. Never fidget. Hold eye contact. Alexander leaned closer, his voice low. "You are doing well." "I feel like I am going to faint," she murmured. "Then faint gracefully," he replied, and for the first time she saw humor in his eyes. The evening unfolded like a performance. She shook hands with investors, listened to polite compliments she barely understood, and followed Alexander's cues. Beneath the surface, she could feel the strain of pretending she belonged, pretending the warmth between them was only for show. When the band began a slow waltz, Alexander turned to her. "One dance?" Lila hesitated. "Again?" He extended his hand, patient. "It seems to be our thing." The memory of their first dance flashed through her, nervous, accidental, unreal. This one felt different. The lights dimmed, and as he guided her across the floor, the rhythm settled into something easy, almost intimate. She could smell his cologne, hear the steady beat of his heart when he drew her closer for the turn. "You are learning fast," he said. "I am trying not to step on your shoes. Failure builds character." "Well," she laughed softly, the tension loosening for the first time that night. It felt dangerously natural. When the song ended, polite applause rippled through the room. Alexander's ex, Elena, was standing nearby, watching with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You certainly move on quickly," Elena said sweetly. Alexander's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, Lila smiled and said, "He is an excellent teacher." The reply landed perfectly cool, graceful, impossible to challenge. Elena's expression faltered for the briefest second before she turned away. As the evening drew to a close, Alexander helped Lila into the car again. For a long moment, neither spoke. The city lights streaked past like gold rivers through the windows. Finally, he said quietly, "You handled yourself better than most people in this room." "Thank you," she said, voice small but sincere, "for trusting me with this." He glanced at her, his features softened by the passing light. "Trust is not something I give easily." She looked out the window, her heart unsteady. For the first time, the distance between who they were and who they pretended to be began to blur, and she did not know if that was comfort or danger. The following week unfolded like a dream she was afraid to wake from. Every morning a black car arrived to take Lila to Sterling headquarters. Between events, she attended lessons in public speaking, posture, and social etiquette. By day, she rehearsed how to act composed. By night, she returned to her apartment, peeled off her borrowed elegance, and reminded herself she was only pretending. Her mother's health was improving thanks to the advance payment from the contract, and that thought kept her going. Yet every time she saw Alexander, it became harder to remember where the lie ended. One afternoon, Clara appeared at her office with a sealed envelope. "Mr. Reed requested your presence at his residence tonight," she said. 7 o'clock sharp. Lila's pulse jumped. His residence. She had only seen it once from a magazine photo, an architectural masterpiece of glass and stone overlooking the river. She arrived as the sun was melting into orange light, the reflection of the skyline dancing across the water. A butler led her through wide corridors that smelled faintly of cedar and rain. The space was silent, almost too perfect. She found Alexander in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, opening a bottle of wine. The casualness startled her. "You cook?" she asked. "Occasionally," he said, glancing over. "It helps me think." He handed her a glass, the gesture unexpectedly gentle. They stood at the marble counter, surrounded by the hum of the city outside. "Tomorrow is the board's charity gala," he said. The investors will expect us there together. It will be larger than anything before. Are you ready? Lila took a sip of wine she could barely taste. As ready as I can be. But you should know, I still forget which fork to use. He smiled faintly. Then use the one that feels right. Confidence is more convincing than precision. She laughed softly. The tension between them felt lighter, almost warm. You are different here, she said after a moment. Less CEO, more human. His eyes flickered, a brief shadow crossing them. That is not always a good thing. I'm sick. They ate in quiet rhythm, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, the kind of dinner that should have felt formal but did not. For once, Alexander looked relaxed. He told her about his mother, who used to dance in the living room when he was a boy, and how success had somehow stolen that simplicity. Lila listened, surprised by the vulnerability beneath his calm. When the meal ended, they stepped onto the terrace. The city stretched out before them, lights twinkling like constellations. A soft breeze lifted her hair. You really built all this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. Brick by brick, deal by deal. And yet, you look like you would trade it for something else. He turned to her then, eyes steady. Maybe I would, but some things cannot be bought back. For a long moment, neither spoke. The distance between them felt charged, fragile, like the pause between two notes of music. Then, as if realizing how close they stood, Alexander cleared his throat and stepped back. We should prepare for tomorrow. It will be a long night. She nodded, trying to steady her pulse. Of course. He walked her to the door, his hand hovering near her back but never quite touching. You did well last week, Lila. Better than I expected. Thank you, she said softly. I will keep trying. When she left, the night air felt cooler than before. She looked up at the towering building one last time. Somewhere inside, a man who seemed carved from control had shown her a glimpse of something real, something unguarded. And as the driver pulled away, Lila realized that the boundaries of their agreement, once clear as glass, were beginning to blur. In her chest, the line between duty and feeling had shifted, and she could no longer tell if she was playing a part or slowly becoming it. The night of the charity gala arrived with the kind of grandeur that made everything feel unreal. Crystal chandeliers burned like captured stars above a sea of tuxedos and silk gowns. Reporters crowded near the entrance, their cameras flashing as guests arrived in a parade of limousines. When Lila stepped out of the car beside Alexander, her breath caught. She wore a silver gown that shimmered under the lights, her hair swept back, her nerves hidden behind a quiet smile. Alexander offered his arm, and she took it. His calm presence steadied her as they entered the ballroom together. Inside, conversations hushed for a brief second. The room seemed to notice them, the powerful CEO, who never brought dates, and the mysterious woman at his side. Lila felt the weight of every stare, but she lifted her chin, remembering Clara's words, "Confidence is not optional." Alexander guided her through introductions, his hand occasionally resting lightly on her back. Each touch was brief, professional, yet it sent a warmth through her that she tried to ignore. When they reached the main table, the chairman of the board leaned in with a smile. "It is good to see you happy again, Alexander. She must be very special." Alexander's answer was simple. "She is." Lila nearly forgot to breathe. He was supposed to be pretending, yet the way he said it soft, certain, felt too real. Hours passed in a whirl of polite conversation and rehearsed smiles. She followed the rhythm of the evening until she saw a flash of red across the room. Elena, dressed impeccably as always, was speaking with a group of investors. When she caught sight of Lila, her smile sharpened. Before Lila could react, Elena approached, her perfume sweet and deliberate. "Well," she said lightly, "you must be the reason Alexander suddenly enjoys company again. I hope he warned you about his temper when things do not go his way." Lila met her Chase, steady. "He has been nothing but kind." Elena tilted her head. "Of course, that is how it begins." Alexander arrived at that moment, his voice cool. "Elena, you are out of line." She smiled thinly. "I am just curious. It is not every day I see you with someone genuine." Lila felt Alexander's hand tighten around hers, not possessive but protective. He turned to her and said quietly, "Ignore her." But Lila did not need to. When the next song began, Alexander led her to the center of the floor, the spotlight following them. The orchestra started a waltz, and just like that first night, The world narrowed to two people. She whispered, "Everyone is watching." "Then let them," he said, his voice calm but heavy with something deeper. Their steps moved in perfect rhythm. His eyes never left hers. For a moment, the music drowned out everything else, the gossip, the cameras, the doubts. It was not an act anymore. It felt like truth dressed as pretense. When the song ended, applause filled the room. Alexander bowed slightly, his hand lingering on hers a heartbeat longer than necessary. "You were perfect," he murmured. Later, as they left the ballroom, the cool night air wrapped around them. The car door opened, and before Lila could step in, Alexander spoke again. "You handled her well tonight. Most people would have run." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I am getting used to your world." He looked at her then, really looked past the gown, past the act. "Be careful, Lila. My world can be dangerous." The warning sounded sincere, almost personal. But as the city lights blurred outside the car window, Lila could not tell if he was warning her about the business or about himself. The following days after the gala felt strangely quiet. The tabloids still buzzed with photos of Alexander Reed and the unknown woman who had captivated everyone on the dance floor. But inside Sterling Dynamics, life went on as if nothing had changed. At least, that was what Lila told herself. In truth, everything had changed. Every meeting, every glance across the corridor, every accidental touch between her and Alexander carried a weight that words could not explain. The boundary of their agreement was beginning to feel paper-thin. Late one evening, after the last employee had left, Lila lingered in the marketing office to finalize a presentation for the foundation Alexander had asked her to assist with. The floor was quiet except for the faint hum of city traffic below. She was typing the final paragraph when the door opened. Alexander stepped inside, still in his suit, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. "I thought you went home," she said softly. "I could say the same for you," he replied. "You have been here since morning." She smiled faintly. "I just wanted to finish this before the deadline." He crossed the room, stopping beside her desk. "You do not need to prove anything to me, Lila." "I am not proving," she said. "I am trying to keep up." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward the window. "Come on, you need air." A few minutes later, they were standing on the building's rooftop terrace. The skyline shimmered beneath them, endless lights against the night sky. A breeze lifted the tension from her shoulders, carrying away the stress of the day. "You did well at the gala," he said quietly, "even with Elena trying to provoke you." "I was terrified," she admitted, "but I figured if I fainted it would ruin your image." That made him laugh, a real laugh, deep and unguarded. It was the first time she had heard it. The sound startled her with how human it was. He leaned against the railing, his tone softening. "You have changed the way people see me, you know. I have spent years keeping my distance, and now everyone thinks I am human again." She turned to face him, the wind tugging at her hair. "Maybe you are." His gaze met hers, and for a heartbeat there was silence. The city noise faded into nothing, leaving only the rhythm of their breathing. "This was not supposed to happen," he said finally, his voice low. "What was not?" "This. You, making me forget the rules I built for myself." Lila took a small step closer, her heart pounding. "Maybe it is time you stopped living by them." Before he could answer, the rooftop door opened abruptly. Clara appeared, her face pale. "Mr. Reed, I am sorry to interrupt, but the board meeting tomorrow has been moved up, and there is something else. Someone leaked photos of you and Miss Evans leaving the gala. They are everywhere." Alexander's expression hardened instantly. "Who leaked them?" "We are still investigating, but the story will hit the morning papers." Lila's stomach sank. "This is my fault. I should not have—" "No," Alexander said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. I will handle it." Clara hesitated. "The board will not like it, sir. They are already questioning your judgment." When she left, silence fell again. The warmth between them was replaced by a chill of reality. Lila looked down at the city lights, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe this has gone too far." Alexander turned to her, eyes steady but shadowed. "If it has, then it is on me, but I will not let them use you to hurt me." The words lingered in the air, heavy with something unspoken, part promise, part confession. In that moment, Lila realized that whatever they were pretending had already turned into something neither of them could control. Morning came heavy with tension. The front page of nearly every financial newspaper showed the same photograph, Alexander Reed and Lila Evans, stepping out of the gala together, his hand resting at the small of her back, her smile shy but unmistakably intimate. The headline read, "Sterling Dynamics, CEO's Secret Romance." When Lila arrived at work, whispers followed her down the hall like wind through tall grass. Conversations stopped as she passed. By the time she reached her desk, an email from the communications department had already landed in her inbox. "Please refrain from commenting on media reports. Mr. Reed will address the board personally." Her hands trembled on the keyboard. She had known this arrangement was temporary, but she had not expected the public humiliation that came with it. She wanted to disappear, yet a small voice inside whispered that walking away now would make it look worse. Just before noon, Clara appeared. "The board has requested your presence," she said gently. "They want to hear your version of the story." Lila's heart dropped. "My version?" "Yes. Mr. Reed insisted you be there." Minutes later, she entered the conference room. 12 executives sat around the long glass table, their expressions carved in judgment. Alexander stood at the head of the room, calm but pale, a folder of documents open before him. He did not sit. The chairman, a man with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Reed, this situation has created a storm. Investors are questioning your judgment. A relationship with an employee violates company policy and undermines the board's confidence." Alexander's jaw tightened. "This was never a violation. Miss Evans has done nothing improper." The chairman raised an eyebrow. "The photographs suggest otherwise." Before Alexander could speak, Lila found her voice. "Those photographs show a dance at a charity event. That is all. I was hired to represent the company with professionalism. If that was misinterpreted, I take responsibility for my part, but I will not accept being labeled as something I am not." The room went silent. Her voice had been calm, clear, and stronger than she felt inside. The chairman glanced at her, then back at Alexander. "Regardless, the company's reputation is at stake. We expect a statement clarifying that there was no personal relationship." Alexander's eyes hardened. "No." The single word cut through the air like glass. "I will not release a statement that turns this woman into collateral damage. If this board cannot trust my leadership, you may begin the process of replacing me." Gasps rippled around the table. The chairman's face darkened. "You are risking your position for an employee?" "I am protecting my integrity," Alexander replied quietly. "And hers." The meeting dissolved into murmurs and whispers. Lila stood frozen, torn between gratitude and fear. When they finally left the room, she followed him into the hallway. "You did not have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did. They might fire you." He turned to her, the mask of control slipping for the first time. "Then let them. I will not build an empire on someone else's humiliation." Lila wanted to speak, but emotion caught in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "You should not have to lose everything because of me." He shook his head. "You do not understand. For the first time in years, I am not thinking about what I could lose. I am thinking about what matters." That night, the news spread fast. Alexander Reed had stepped down temporarily as CEO pending a board investigation. By the time Lila reached her apartment, reporters were outside the building, shouting questions about their affair. She slipped through the back entrance, her heart breaking. Her phone buzzed a message from Alexander. "Do not speak to the press. I will fix this. Trust me." She stared at the words, torn between hope and fear. Everything they had built, fake or not, was collapsing under the weight of exposure, and for the first time, she realized that what she felt for him was no longer pretend. But love, in the world he lived in, might come with a price she was not ready to pay. 2 days passed in a blur of headlines and silence. The world speculated while Lila Evans hid in her small apartment, blinds closed, television off, her phone vibrating with unanswered calls. Outside, the press waited like vultures. Inside, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the contract she had signed weeks ago. 4 weeks. That was the promise. But promises had a way of breaking under the weight of truth. Her mother called, worried. "Are you safe, honey?" "I am fine," Lila lied. "It will blow over soon." She wished she believed that. Alexander had not contacted her again since the message. The news reported that he had stepped away from Sterling Dynamics indefinitely. Anonymous sources claimed the scandal had cost the company millions. Every time she saw his face on the screen, her chest ached. Late one evening, a knock echoed through her apartment. She froze, thinking it was another reporter. But when she opened the door, Alexander stood there tired, unshaven, still dressed in a dark coat that dripped with rain. "You should not be here," she said, her voice barely steady. "I know," he replied, "but I needed to see you." He stepped inside. The silence between them was thick, filled with all the things they had not said. Finally, she spoke. "You lost everything because of me." He shook his head. "I did not lose anything that mattered. The board wanted someone easier to control. Let them have it. But your company... Companies can be rebuilt," he interrupted gently. "People cannot." Lila stared at him, unsure what to believe. "Why did you do it, Alexander? Why protect me when you could have just told them the truth that it was all pretend?" His eyes met hers, calm but heavy. "Because it stopped being pretend a long time ago." Her breath caught. For a moment she forgot the noise of the outside world. "Do you realize what you are saying?" "Yes," he said simply. "I have spent years surrounded by power and people who smile because they are paid to. You were the first person who looked at me and saw more than what I owned." Lila wanted to speak, but tears blurred her vision. "I do not belong in your world," she whispered. "Then I will leave it," he said. "I am starting a foundation independent of Sterling. I want to do something that matters, real charity, not publicity. And I want you to help me run it." She blinked, startled. "You want me to work with you again? After all of this?" He smiled faintly. "You are the only one I trust." For a long time neither moved. The rain softened against the windows, the air between them fragile and alive. Lila took a slow breath. "If I say yes, it cannot be because of guilt. It has to be because it is real." Alexander stepped closer, his voice quiet. "Then let us make it real." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was the contract she had signed weeks ago, torn neatly in half. "No more agreements," he said. "No more pretending." Tears filled her eyes as she looked up at him. "What happens now?" "We rebuild," he said, "together." Outside, the storm began to fade, leaving behind a fragile calm. In that small apartment, stripped of pretense and titles, two people stood facing the wreckage of everything they had pretended to be, and for the first time, something real began to grow in its place. 6 months later, the ballroom looked different. The chandeliers still glowed with golden light, and the music still floated softly through the air. But the mood tonight was not about wealth or appearances. It was about something genuine, something earned. The banners read, "The Sterling Hope Foundation, Inaugural Charity Gala." The very organization Alexander Reed had built after walking away from his company now stood on its own. And beside him, helping coordinate every detail, was Lila Evans, no longer an assistant, no longer a stand-in, but a partner. The night was a success. Donations poured in, speeches were made, and reporters captured smiles instead of scandals. When Alexander stepped to the microphone, the room grew still. 6 months ago, he began, "I learned that what defines success is not how high you climb, but how you choose to rise again." Tonight is proof that second chances can build something stronger than before. Applause echoed through the hall. Lila watched from the side of the stage, her chest tightening with quiet pride. He had rebuilt his reputation not through control, but through kindness. When the music started again, Alexander walked toward her, the crowd parting slightly as he reached out his hand. "Dance with me," he said, his voice soft, familiar. She laughed, shaking her head. "You and your dances." "Who?" "It started everything," he replied. "It seems right to let it end this way." She hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand in his. The orchestra began to play the same waltz they had danced to at that first gala, but now there was no pretending, no hidden contract. Every step carried the memory of how far they had come from a lie born of convenience to a truth forged through struggle. Around them the guests smiled, sensing something pure in the way they moved together. Alexander leaned closer and whispered, "You saved me, Lila. Not from scandal or failure, but from myself." She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "You saved me too. You reminded me that I was worth more than my circumstances." As the final note of the song faded, he reached into his jacket and revealed a small velvet box. Her breath caught. Inside was a simple ring, a thin band of gold engraved with 3 words, No contract, just love. He held it out to her. This time, there are no terms, no signatures, no deadlines. Only a promise I intend to keep for the rest of my life. Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded, unable to speak, and he slipped the ring onto her finger as the room erupted in applause. Outside the ballroom, the city lights shimmered against the windows, reflecting their dance like a promise written in glass. Lila leaned her head against his shoulder, whispering, "Do you think people will ever believe we started as a lie?" Alexander smiled. "Maybe not, but the truth has a way of lasting longer than gossip." They stood there for a moment, the noise of the party fading behind them. Two people who had once lived in separate worlds now shared one built on honesty and faith. And as the night carried on, Lila realized that every step, every mistake, every heartbreak had led them here to a place where love was no longer borrowed or hidden. It was real, it was theirs, and it was just beginning.